Welcome to Movie Magic. I am your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today I just wanted to talk and briefly review Young Washington, which at the time of recording this video, I literally just came home from watching this in the theater. So this is kind of similar to the last few episodes of the show, is going to be a little bit more of a basically immediate impressions type of thing. Not a super in-depth, not a scripted review, just me very off the cuff talking about my general experience with the movie. And that is, in short, I guess the recommendation or whatever that you want to put at the beginning of this film is I thought it was good, and I think that it is actually worth going out and seeing. It's by no means one of the best movies I've ever seen, not even one of the best movies I've seen this year, because I've seen plenty of great movies this year, but I do really appreciate what Young Washington is doing for a number of reasons. One of those is because I think that some of its general topic matter, I guess, its general setting is actually something that is a little bit overlooked in the context of even American history, something that I really appreciate being covered a little bit more in depth, and also because being the 250th anniversary basically of America being its own country and being an American myself, that's something that I actually hold a little bit of pride in. And yeah, I thought that this movie captures a lot of that kind of American spirit in a lot of really great ways. So what is Young Washington actually about? I mean, based off the title, you probably know what it is. It's a story a little bit of the younger George Washington before the Revolutionary War. More specifically, it is basically right at the start of the French Indian War in American history. That is, like 2 decades or something before the Revolutionary War took place, or rather it started 2 decades before and ended around a decade or so before the Revolutionary War took place, and is relatively important within the context of, colonial America, pre-revolutionary America. But like I suggested just a bit ago, is definitely something that I feel like is overlooked a bit within the context of American history, certainly overshadowed a lot by the later Revolutionary War, for fairly obvious reasons. It makes sense why that is, something that happened, but I definitely don't think that there's enough emphasis put on the French Indian War and the context of that, leading up into the Revolutionary War. And so that's definitely one of the things that I enjoyed and appreciated a lot about Young Washington is, some of the early days of the French Indian War being depicted through the lens of this particular figure, George Washington, of course, being one of the most important men in the history of the country, and arguably the bravest man in the history of the country. And I think that a lot of that early material there is executed quite well. So what are some of the more specific things that I enjoyed about this movie? I think that the casting was very good, and more importantly, the performances were good because of really great writing. I love the authenticity of a lot of the dialogue. It is not spoken in, super modern English, so there's some aspects of some dated language that come through within the film that I actually really appreciate. Some of the syntax of the sentences, one of those little things that's like, 250 years ago, we obviously spoke a little bit differently than we do today. The structure of our sentences, some of the word choice in certain regards, but general grammar and the sophistication of the language really is no small part of it. And that shining through in this film is something that I really appreciate, setting off against, certain other films that are not super great at trying to adapt historical language in an authentic way. This movie does seek to do that just enough to embed you and engross you within that time and the setting, but obviously not so much to really distract. I never felt like I was distracted by the modernization of the language, nor the datedness of it, so that balance was struck really well, and that writing, like I said, obviously also kind of pulls through with the performances in creating something that was really enjoyable to watch. Casting for Washington himself was really good. Even the younger version of Washington, as there is a brief flashback sequence, if you want to call it brief, the structure of this film doesn't really make that a flashback per se, although it sort of is, right? You have a younger version of Washington even than is depicted on the cover right over there, and that kid who performs Washington there is a great child actor performance in there. A lot of the other performances are really good in here. I mean, even just speaking to the cast, there is a particular character in the last act of the movie that is played by Andy Serkis, for example. So even Andy Serkis is involved in this movie. So that kind of goes to show the caliber of the casting decisions within the movie, and I think it's all really good. It's actually super, super well acted and well written, and that makes for an enjoyable experience where the bulk of this movie isn't even about necessarily the action or any of that kind of thing. It's a little bit more about the internal drama of certain sequences, and while there is some action, a couple battle sequences that do occur in the movie, I felt myself generally more engaged, especially in the first two acts where a lot of it isn't really the battle, just by the dialogue and by the more political stuff undergirding the plot and what all that's about. And because the casting and because the writing are good, that stuff is really enjoyable to watch, right? So that was a big part of why I appreciated this movie. And another big part of why I appreciated the movie is because it is actually really well done in relative simplicity. You know, I don't think I can recall very many like cinematographic decisions or like directorial decisions as far as like blocking and shot framing and stuff like that that were necessarily super profound. I guess there's like one shot off the top of my head that I can think of that is notable in its uniqueness within the context of the movie, and that shot more or less opens the film and is repeated a little bit later. We'll talk a bit about the structure of the movie a little bit later in this video, if I remember to. Hopefully I do, because I'm not using notes for this video. But anyway, outside of that one particular shot that stands out from the rest in that way, most of the actual, directorial and DP decisions on the movie aren't really going to blow you away, right? But they utilize simple techniques in effective ways. For example, the rule of thirds, if you're a photographer or a filmographer, you absolutely know what the rule of thirds is, if that's even the proper term. I'm not either of those things myself, so I'm sorry if I explain any of these things. But essentially, I'm even using it within even just the framing of this video, right? Like, I'm on the left third of this frame. That image over on the other side is in the right third of that frame. It's a way of offsetting certain scenery within a shot to make it more visually interesting, right? And also to offset things. When things are too symmetrical, they can feel a little bit unnatural and also, kind of undriven. It's one of the criticisms that certain modern Disney Pixar animation has gotten, is that a lot of some of those films are very centered in their framing of vast majority of shots. There was a new Pixar film? I can't remember, that had a trailer recently that I saw on Twitter was getting absolutely reamed for how centered every single shot in that trailer was compared to past animated films, and that being a problem, and people theorizing that that's like something to make it easy to clip for like TikTok and stuff like that to get, some sort of implicit marketing decision. I don't know how true any of those sort of maybe conspiratorial ideas are, but it is definitely an artistic thing that one can notice. Young Washington utilizes that simple rule of thirds in a lot of shots in ways that I found actually really evocative and noticeable, but again, without being distracting. It's not like it's trying to be the most unique shot film in the world, but it is utilizing some of those simple techniques in ways that I think are effective for the storytelling and in evoking some of those emotions, right? Plenty of those shots that are utilizing that third rule are utilizing focus in ways that are, again, pretty simple, where you just have the one figure in the foreground that's unfocused and the one in the background that isn't, and switching that depending on who's talking or certain other decisions, right? So just general simple decisions that carry the mood and the tone of the movie forward really well, even if they're not like the craziest thing you've ever seen. So I don't think there's anything to complain about on that front. I found it definitely worth watching for that. But I did mention earlier that I would talk a tiny bit about the structure of the movie, and so I do want to get into that very briefly here. There's some interesting decisions here, maybe my one, I guess you could say, notable critique of the movie is that there's a little bit of it that is repeated technically, and that is because the cold open is really good. It opens in a battlefield sequence, and goes through a few minutes of that and features Washington basically getting out of a wagon in basically the start of an ambush attack, and then going and trying to find the general, the leader of this portion of the army where they're at, so that he can save basically a particular group of them who are said to probably be lost. That, like, what is there to actually gain from going to search for these people? And that question sets you back into the flashback kind of mentioned before, that goes into an even younger child version of Washington for a little bit, then jumps to a more adolescent version of him, the version of him that you see through most of the movie, and then carries from that point forward until it catches back up to that battle sequence, and then you repeat some of those shots from the intro. Some of them are different angles of the same shots. It's a little bit cut down. It's not quite as long as the cold open is, because you've already seen the entire cold open, so it's just utilizing the most important shots from that, and then continues through the rest of the last act after that. So you're like getting a glimpse of what the last act is, or the start of the final act, basically, or I guess maybe the start of the climax if you want to think of it that way, and then it goes back into the opener act. So that's a certain interesting structural decision. Again, maybe my only critique is the fact that there's some of those repeated shots, and I'm not 100% sure about using, like, basically one of the opening shot, essentially, for all intents and purposes, is almost one for one covered over. It's like copied over, so it appears in the film twice. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that kind of thing, for example, but generally speaking, I found the cold open to be a great intro to the film, and then I thought that a lot of the structure of the film otherwise was really good. It's just kind of that specific creative decision that I'm still not 100% sure about, but otherwise, like, a lot of this film is really enjoyable to watch from that perspective. From a more narrative side of things, I think there's only one thing that I do have to complain about. That's a little bit more on the romantic love interest side of things. I think it's left hanging a little bit. Technically speaking, it is like closed enough, but basically isn't regarded or really mentioned to any notable degree in the final act. And I do think that's a slight shame. Like, it feels like it's just kind of dropped in the middle randomly. Like I said, it does close off in a way that makes it work. It's not like that big of a deal, but I do wish there was a little bit more kind of mentioned there near the end of the film that wasn't, but I think that maybe part of that is going to be, retaken up in a potential sequel. I'm not 100% sure the truth to these claims. I saw it more rumored on social media, and you know how that can be in terms of the veracity of those kinds of claims, that there's maybe a sequel to Young Washington being produced by the title 1776. If that is true, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see, what they choose to adapt and how they choose to adapt it, because the quality of Young Washington was really up there, and if comparable quality can be brought forward with more Revolutionary War stuff, that is something that I'm really interested in seeing for sure. And if there is such a thing being produced, I kind of hope it's more than one part, right? Because Young Washington was a 2-hour film, and covered very small slice of, the early French Indian War from Washington's perspective, and, some of the other context surrounding that. And I think that trying to cover, the Revolutionary War, essentially, even just the beginning of it, from in a single film, I think would be maybe biting off more than you could chew. I don't think that that's really something that they should try to do, if that's something they're trying to do at all. I would hope to see like a multi-part kind of Revolutionary War film sequence, maybe even especially if they're going to take like multiple main characters into account. I don't know. If they do a sequel, is that going to be from George Washington's perspective primarily as well? I don't know. Like, I really don't know what that kind of thing would look like, but I am interested in seeing more, because I thought that this film was good. And if the same people tackling, a little bit more of this early American history would, that's something that I would definitely be interested in seeing. I think that that's basically going to be my, impression, thoughts of Young Washington, a very brief sort of review, more reaction to the movie. Let me know what you thought about the movie if you went and saw it. I think that the reception of this online, or at least on Letterboxd, is a lot more muted or down than I think it really deserves to be. I think that the most common rating is 3 stars, which I guess is fair. I'm going to put this more close to a 4-star experience. It's not, exceptional like a 4.5 or a 5-star film would be, but definitely one that I enjoyed way more than not. 3.5-star feels too low for this, in my opinion. Like 3.5-star would be like my average personally. I think this, oh, sorry. Don't know what happened to my voice there. It is weak today. I apologize. This is better than an average film for me. It's above average, and that's what I think a 4-star rating would entail there. The average rating on Letterboxd is 2.6 stars, and I'm wondering how many of those like half and 1-star reviews, because there's a lot of them, are just people hating on America for modern political reasons, which I think is an unfair way to rate the movie. I'm not entirely sure. We'll see, but well, definitely one of the top reviews I see here on Letterboxd is State of the Nation so bad they're making George Washington propaganda movies. Yeah, that's a bullshit review, to put it kindly. I think that the history of America is great, actually, and the founding of it is a very worthy thing of celebrating, and I think that Young Washington does a pretty noble job of covering some of that early material, and I personally can't wait to see more. So that's my thoughts on the movie, I guess. Thank you for watching this video. If you did, I really appreciate it. Like I said, let me know some of your thoughts down below if you went and saw it. But for now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.